After 40 years of marriage, she was left with nothing, until a group of bikers changed her life. The rain in Seattle doesn't just fall. It feels like it's trying to wash away the very memory of warmth. For Eleanor, standing on the cracked pavement outside a modest two-story house she had called home for 40 years, the cold seeped through her thin coat and settled deep in her bones. At 62, with silver hair plastered to her forehead and a single battered suitcase at her feet, Eleanor was invisible. Inside that house, the life she had built was being dismantled. Her husband, Robert, had passed away 6 months prior, leaving behind a void that grief had only just begun to fill. But it wasn't grief that had brought her to this moment, it was betrayal. Robert's nephew, Marcus, whom they had treated like a son, had produced documents, forged, as Eleanor would later learn, but legally binding enough for now, that claimed ownership of the property and the modest savings Robert had left. With no immediate family of her own, and too exhausted to fight a legal battle she couldn't afford, Eleanor had been given an ultimatum: leave by noon or be escorted out by police. The moving truck had taken the furniture. Marcus had kept the jewelry, the photos, and the heirlooms, telling her, "You don't need memories, Aunt Ellie. You need to face reality." Reality was a bus stop 3 miles away, a dwindling bank account, and a heart shattered into more pieces than she thought possible. She sat on the wet bench, clutching her purse, watching cars splash mud onto her shoes. Passers-by hurried past, eyes averted, wrapped in their own urgent worlds. To them, she was just another statistic, an elderly woman down on her luck. The shame burned hotter than the cold. How does one go from a beloved wife and hostess of Sunday dinners to a stranger on a street corner in the span of an hour? Tears blurred her vision, mixing with the rain. She whispered a prayer, not for money or a house, but simply for the strength to take the next breath. The silence of the universe felt deafening. Then a low rumble began to vibrate through the pavement. It started as a hum and grew into a roar that drowned out the traffic. Around the corner came a procession of chrome and leather. Dozens of motorcycles, gleaming despite the gray sky, rolled to a halt near the bus stop. They were the Iron Guardians, a local motorcycle club known more for their intimidating appearance than their community involvement. Men and women with tattoos covering their arms, beards braided with beads, and vests adorned with patches that commanded respect, and often fear, dismounted in unison. Eleanor shrank back against the shelter wall, instinctively pulling her suitcase closer. In her mind, these were the kinds of people who made trouble, not the kind who solved it. She prepared herself to be ignored or perhaps mocked. But the leader, a massive man named Silas with a beard like steel wool and eyes surprisingly gentle, walked toward her. He didn't loom, he approached with a slow, deliberate grace. He removed his helmet, revealing a face etched with lines of experience. "Ma'am," his voice was gravelly but soft. "Are you okay? You look like you've been carrying the weight of the world out here." Eleanor tried to speak, but her voice cracked. I'm fine, just waiting for the bus." Silas glanced at the single suitcase, then at the empty space where a home should be. He looked back at his crew, who had formed a protective semicircle around them, shielding her from the wind and the staring eyes of the street. One of the riders, a woman with fiery red hair named Raven, stepped forward. She knelt so she was eye level with Eleanor. "We saw the moving truck earlier. We saw the young man yelling. We saw you walk out with nothing but that bag. We don't know your story, but we know what it looks like when someone gets kicked while they're down." Eleanor broke. The dam she had held together for hours finally burst. Through sobbing gasps, she told them everything. The 40 years of marriage, the loss of Robert, the cruelty of Marcus, the forgery, and the terrifying uncertainty of tomorrow. As she spoke, the bikers didn't interrupt. They listened with an intensity that made her feel seen for the first time in days. When she finished, silence returned, but it was different now. It was heavy with purpose. Silas stood up and turned to his group. He didn't shout orders, he simply nodded. Within minutes, the scene transformed. The roar of engines returned, but this time they weren't leaving. 2 bikers gently took Eleanor's suitcase. Another draped a thick leather jacket over her trembling shoulders. "You aren't getting on that bus tonight, Eleanor," Silas stated firmly. "Not while we're around." They escorted her not to a shelter, but to the clubhouse, a large warehouse converted into a warm, bustling sanctuary. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, grease, and camaraderie. Strangers became hosts instantly. A meal was heated up, a hot stew that warmed her from the inside out. A bed was made up in the quiet office. But it wasn't just the physical comfort, it was the dignity they restored. They treated her not as a charity case, but as a matriarch. They asked about Robert, they laughed at her stories, they made her feel like she belonged. Over the next few days, the Iron Guardians did something that shocked the entire town. They didn't just offer temporary shelter, they mobilized. Raven, it turned out, was a paralegal before she joined the club. She reviewed Eleanor's papers and immediately spotted the discrepancies in Marcus's documents. Silas used his connections to find a pro bono lawyer who specialized in elder fraud. The sight became legendary in the neighborhood, a phalanx of bikers marching up to Marcus's door, not to threaten violence, but to deliver legal summons and stand as witnesses to Eleanor's rightful claim. Intimidated by the sheer presence of 30 loyal defenders and the looming threat of criminal charges for fraud, Marcus crumbled. He signed the reversal papers within the hour. When Eleanor finally returned to her home, it wasn't alone. The bikers helped her move her few belongings back in. They fixed the lock Marcus had broken. They stocked her pantry. As they prepared to leave, Silas handed her a card with the club's number. "If you ever need anything," he said, "you call. You're family now, Eleanor, and nobody messes with family." Eleanor watched them ride away, the sunset catching the chrome of their bikes, turning them into silhouettes of gold against the darkening sky. She realized then that family isn't always defined by blood or 40 years of shared history. Sometimes family is found in the most unexpected places, riding in on 2 wheels when the world has turned its back. Her darkest chapter had ended, not because of a miracle from the heavens, but because of the kindness of strangers who chose to see her humanity. Eleanor wiped a tear from her cheek, but this time she smiled. She was no longer nothing. She was loved, she was protected, and she knew that no matter how hard the rain fell, she would never truly be cold again. Thanks for watching.